This episode of the Luminaries on Deep in the Weeds is proudly supported by Deputy, rostering and timesheets without the usual chaos.
No matter how structured I try and make the menu and how I want to be, produce doesn't wait for anybody at the end of the day. So you do need to be ready to go, and you do need to have ideas in the back of your head at all times so that when things, you can pounce on getting the produce in and then showing the team how you want it prepared.
This is the Luminaries on the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Sustainability is top of mind for many in the restaurant industry, but changing ways personally and for the industry as a whole seems quite challenging. But is it as confronting as we believe? How can you implement change for the better and maintain a viable hospitality business too? Kane Pollard is the executive chef of Soul Restaurant at Sky City and co-owner of Topiary in Adelaide. Kane, how are you?
Yeah, amazing. Thank you, Anthony. Thanks for having me.
You've had an incredible couple of years making a real impact on the South Australian dining landscape. What's it been like for you?
Yeah, it's been a hell of a roller coaster. That's for sure. It's been 10 years since I've been at Topiary, and the industry changed a lot, and the focus has changed a lot, and it's been exciting to be a part of it for sure.
It's been challenging the last 2 years, which we can get into, but your connection with produce and focus on sustainability has really been a key sort of attribute of yours. Where did that all begin?
I think growing up in the Adelaide Hills, and a single mum and my brother, it was definitely about, using what you have and what you can get, what you're surrounded by. Being part of a market gardening family, spending a lot of time in the garden, helping out in the school holidays and getting that appreciation for planting something and seeing it grow and then harvesting it. And, why would you want to waste any of that? Use as much as you possibly can. And that just naturally filtered into everyday life and then the commercial kitchen as well.
Not everyone grows up in a market gardening family. So take us back there. Do you have any stories of what that was like?
Oh, I think it was a blessing for me, the opportunity to spend your school holidays in the open air. I remember we used to live in Piccadilly for a couple of years, and the garden was about 15, 20-minute ride from there. And finishing up school and jumping up in the morning and feeling that cool, crisp air about 5 a.m. and jumping on your bike and riding across to plant rhubarb, pick rhubarb and assist the grandpa and uncle in the planting of the garden was just a really beautiful way to spend my time. And I've only got fond memories of that. It was a fantastic part of life.
When did the interest in cooking come about for you?
Not an overly romantic beginning, I guess. In a way, it was a walking home with a friend of mine, and he was getting into it and really loved watching Jamie Oliver do his thing and making cooking fun and approachable and bringing family and friends into the mix and I guess showing how much fun it could be and how you could use simple produce and create something that really inspires people and makes the night was exciting. So that kind of sparked it, and then heading back to school and going to the career counsellor and asking what should I do, what can I be, being all confused and young and surprisingly even though my maths grades were quite good and I was doing well at school, the farmer and a chef were the two top choices apparently in the system. And I think the chef side of it was already in the back of my mind, so I decided to get a job at the local nursing home as a kitchen hand. And just that instant feeling of being part of a small team and feeding people and giving them happiness and conversing about what was going on was just I really loved it from the start.
take us back to that nursing home. If you look back, what was it like in that kitchen compared to the sort of commercial kitchens you're used to now?
It was a relatively good setup. Extremely hygienic, and the systems were in place. It wasn't chefs running it. It was mothers and grandmothers. So there was
wow.
It was a really beautiful place to be. It was simple, very simple food, but nourishing. And being in the hills, the clientele that were living there, they knew about local produce and they appreciated that produce. And so that's, I guess, what they expected to be eating at that point in their lives. So, yeah, it was, like I said, it was very simple, but home cooked style. But it was, it was a very wholesome place to be. And I learned some pretty cool stuff there just to get started, for sure.
That nourishing aspect that plays a role in your food, did it begin there?
I think it did, yeah. There, and then I went to the Scenic Hotel when I was 15 or late 15, and continued with the dishes and learning more. And yeah, still, I think anything that's sourced locally and bought in whole and washed and trimmed and peeled on site, you want to use it all, and part of that is the nourishing aspect of it as well, and making sure you're feeling healthy and you're feeling good about what you're serving and what you're eating. And those first two jobs probably shaped that.
Is there any ingredient or dish from that time that sort of flicked on a switch in your mind in regards to how to use all of an ingredient?
Yeah, there was a simple one, but it was a beetroot dip that was just whole roasted beetroots, essentially, with the leaves on and everything. And they were covered over with foil, a bit of olive oil, garlic, onions, seasoning, fennel seeds, and it was just slow roasted until tender, all blitzed up into one with a little bit of cream cheese. And like that sort of started as the norm, I guess. And then moving into more commercial style kitchens, it was more about perfection and getting the colours right and that sort of thing. So I started to notice leaves being thrown and peels being tossed, and it sort of sparked something in me to go, I wonder why they used them there and they don't use them here. But I was always asking that question in the early days.
How hard was it in those days to go down that road when the industry was generally cutting and trimming and throwing away parts of the ingredient that weren't needed? Was that a tough road for you to head down?
Not at the beginning, I guess. Being super young and just going with the flow to start with, I was just excited to be learning, and it was something different. Like I did question it, but I didn't think too deeply about it at that time. It was just about doing what you're told and aiming for the finished product to be as perfect as possible. And I enjoyed that side of it, but it was a great feeling to kind of come out the other end of that, come back around and start to use it all again. It started to make a lot more sense and feel a lot more like me on a plate by the time it got to the customer.
Well, tell us about that moment when you did come around to that moment. What were you doing, and do you have any stories of that moment where you landed there?
I got a job at the Locavore in Stirling, which when it first opened, it was only sourcing ingredients from 160 kilometre radius, so no sugar was used, only local honey. So you're trying to, I guess, take the knowledge that you had and then shift it around to using different ingredients in different ways, trying to create the same textures. There we got the opportunity to meet a lot of local growers and a lot of very small growers that would just bring in, random bits on any occasion, and also some of the forage stuff. I think growing up, walking through Fennel on the riverside and picking blackberries was a standard after school stroll, kicking the footy and all of that sort of stuff as well. But it was didn't think too much of it at the time, but I remember when one of the growers brought in some honey, and he also brought in a massive bunch of fennel fronds, and as soon as that smell entered the kitchen, my mind was just taken straight back, and it was completely eye-opening. And it's that incredible moment, which I think a lot of people experience, that you grow up and you take things for, you take advantage of the fact that, you were who you were, you're doing what you're doing, you don't think too much about it, but then you go through, you learn a whole lot of other stuff, but then there's this moment that you come back around and start to appreciate the early days that little bit more and why it means so much.
Topiary is where you really made a name for yourself and quite an impact. How did that all begin?
My partner at the time, we were going to get married, but she was studying to be a teacher. She just finished studying, and she was obviously going to be working more of a 9-to-5 type role. I'd done many years in the kitchens and many hours, and I was hitting that point where you start to question, do I want to be doing this forever? And how important is career over family time and exploring the world? And so, I started to look for still a job as a chef, but as, I'm happy to take a step back and work on something a little bit more simple. The Topiary Cafe, it was called at the time, was advertising for a head chef that just did light lunches and high teas and afternoon teas. And I thought, look, it's a bit of a curveball, but we'll give it a go. I showed up for my interview. I walked up the beautiful path underneath the hand-painted welcome sign, and it was feeling good. It was feeling natural. It's nestled in a valley, so it's not the the city-bound gardening centre that some might imagine. It's really nestled in a gully, and it's a beautiful spot. But I walked up to the door, and there's this big pink menu, and I was like, what am I doing? Like, this doesn't feel like the right path. But spent an extra couple of minutes walking through the fruit and veg section of the garden and saw what they had planted up in the hills, the fruit trees, a humongous fig tree that hangs over the garden centre. And something sparked. That's probably that market gardening start that really started to sprout inside of me, and I felt excited to get in there and have a chat. And it pretty much worked from there.
Well, you went for a job there, and now you're a co-owner. Well, tell us a little bit about the history of the venue and how much you changed it.
Yeah, so it's a 160-year-old home, which is nestled in the nursery. The current for that full 160 years, which is pretty incredible, being surrounded by that history and that love that family gives a place and the land. It started off as a Topiary tea house about 40 years ago, where they switched it from a house to a space where they used to grow camellias, like a sunroom type situation, and then into a tea house where they served filter coffee, high teas and scones. And it built a name in its own right. Back then it was Di Hall, the original owner. The wife of John Hall went over to England fairly often and loves her high tea, so she was one of the first ones to bring it back to Australia and give it a go. And it went well. It made sense in that space. The older clientele loved it, and to sit there in the garden and look out at the camellias and be eating off a high tea stand seemed quite ideal. So they did really well with that. It slowly transitioned into a cafe from there, and then I jumped in, and they wanted to add breakfast service, and I couldn't sit still for very long with the current simple menu setup, so I started doing a couple of specials, showcasing some local bits and pieces that people were dropping in. And again, like, I can't praise the older generation enough, because that's how they grew up, was appreciating those ingredients and using them every day. And so they were the first ones that tasted it, and they'd say, oh, this the house-made butter tastes exactly how my mum used to make it, and that moment of baking bread and serving butter with it, that was all made on site and reminded them of their childhood, was probably the beginning of something very special. And it all kind of went from there.
The offering changed and you took over the venue. Tell us about that period and what were the challenges going from chef to owner?
Yeah, so I was head chef there for about a year and a half. And then the owners approached myself and asked whether I was keen to take it over. And I wasn't in the perfect financial position to do it. So I said, it's probably not going to happen, but thank you very much for asking. And I went home that night and went over to visit my father-in-law, Pelly, who has been a teacher his entire life. But he was always excited and felt rejuvenated when he had people over and cooked food and opened a nice bottle of wine or made coffee from scratch, in the machine from scratch. And so there's those simple pleasures of food, wine, anything with unique flavour and things that he's got his hands into to make and create is what brought him happiness. And I went around to visit, and he looked particularly grey that day, marking the books at about 10:30 at night. And I thought, far out, I wonder what he'd think. And I asked him, and he pretty much said yes on the spot. So it's he jumped into a complete career change, and it was controversial in many ways, but to see him, he's never been happier being part of the team, which is very fulfilling. But so he decided as well. He made it happen, and I basically continued with the menu in its same form for a couple of months, just doing a couple of specials just to get my head around how things worked. And then slowly but surely just started shifting the menu. There was a chicken and tinned asparagus vol au vent on there for a little while, which was, the first day of taking over, that was changed to a fresh asparagus and whole chicken vol au vent with our house-made pastry. That was a change that was a bit of a defining moment, I suppose. And then it kind of just kept snowballing from there. Like I said, the bread and butter thing, the appreciation started to grow, and the clientele started to be more willing to take risk. And they went on the journey with me. I took it slowly to start with. It was probably 2 or 3 years in total of that transitioning period, and still doing high tea in the background. But eventually, the lunch crowd and the breakfast crowd were much more strong than the afternoon tea and high tea crowd, and so it got to that point where we had to consider what to do. And COVID pretty much made that decision for us, and it was a bit of a blessing in disguise in that weird way. But we started rolling with tasting menus and a more interesting a la carte option, and it started to gain some traction. It probably gained a bit of traction before COVID, but the final decision of getting rid of high teas and really jumping in the deep end was the moment. So
What sort of role did the community and connection play with this transition?
Like 100% of the inspiration came from the community and the connection. I think being in a tea tree gully, it's a relatively small historic town. There's people that would come through every day or every week. And bringing in the random bits and pieces of produce, small amounts, was a really huge part. Starting to go to the market every Sunday and connecting with those growers and getting our fruit and veg from them and hearing their stories and how things are grown and how they, what they believe in and the way that it should be grown and nurtured. All of that started to contribute to the whole ethos of the place, and it started to become its own beast and take on a personality of its own, and people started to get to know it for those reasons, and that just made it even more fulfilling and exciting to be there on the pass, plating up, prepping every day. Yeah, it's great.
Are there any producers of that region that you can tell us about that you connected with?
Oh, yeah. So many. I guess one of the original protein suppliers that we connected with was Nature's Chicken, which is Kerry. He grew up on his family's apple orchard and then took over the apple growing business. And he decided to try something new and invested in the chicken setup and had the chickens roaming the orchards every day. So I guess we created a dish around him using the whole chicken and the apples that he grew. And that storytelling side of it and that connection started to become a really huge part of we got out. The more we connected with those producers and growers, the more the menu evolved and the more meaning I think it had. And then the customers connected with it even more and felt, like they were getting more than just a meal out of a visit to the topiary.
Can you tell us about this chicken dish that you created that honoured that?
Oh, yeah. It was had a sour chicken glaze, so we juiced the more sour side of the apples, added that to the chicken glaze, and then just did a whole roll, basically minced the thigh and made like a sausage farce and rolled it up with the breast and then wrapped it all up in the skin and cooked it sous vide just to get that texture right, and then finished it in a high heat oven just to crispen up that skin on the plate with the glaze. And then it was one of those dishes that the key components stayed, but the accompaniments changed as the season changed. I think we went through, asparagus in late spring and just sort of moved through the seasons and added in some track components of the apple.
What sort of impact did this dramatic change in direction have on you?
I think it's something that I was always searching for. I think most chefs that want to get to a head chef role or want to run their own kitchen, you're constantly asking yourself, without sounding too cliche, but who am I? And why am I here? And what am I trying to prove? What am I trying to create? What makes me feel good when I serve it? And that did that for me. It was gave the food meaning. It was flavors that worked. It was visually appealing, but it went deeper than that. And to talk directly to the customers about how that dish came about started to give me the confidence to go out and talk to the customers and really, not say, this is from here, that's how we produce that, that's how it's cooked, that's how it's prepared, but more so like, why is it there? It was an exciting time.
This episode of the Luminaries on Deep in the Weeds is proudly supported by Deputy, helping managers and staff do their best work.
Hospitality is where Deputy was born. This is the industry we have pledged to help thrive. Hospitality thrives with Deputy because of the great people management we bring through easy rostering, timekeeping, and communication. And that's just the start. We're innovating with so many new things that I believe that we will make hospitality thrive even more than it did before the pandemic.
For more information, go to deputy.com. You're also executive chef of Soul Restaurant at Sky City, which is quite different to Topiary. Are there similarities within the roles?
There wasn't to start with. It's been I've been there a year as of yesterday, which is exciting. But I think the team I had at Topiary range from currently. So the Alex who's heading it now for me has been there for 9 years. Lee's been there for 8. Ash has been there for 7, and then Roger's been there for 6. So the 4 chefs that were part of that crucial last 5 years where we started to rank and we started to be discovered, were all there then, and they're all still there now. And I think that's the key to a successful restaurant is time, and in my eyes is time and building a team that are just as passionate as you. And yes, a brand new restaurant on top of an incredible wavy gold building with a melting pot of team members from some local, some from all over the world or the country, was definitely a challenge for me at the start. But over the past year, they've started to understand the way that I like to run my kitchen, and it's not in a harsh way. It's I don't yell, I don't swear, I don't get angry. It's more about listening to their thoughts on a dish and allowing them to contribute as much as possible, as much as they want to, and listening to that, and letting that help steer the menu in a certain direction. Because if they're not passionate about what they're producing, what they're plating, then the end product's not going to be where it needs to be.
How much has it changed since in your time there over a year?
Yeah, it went through about probably 3 stages, and we've just hit stage 3 a couple of months ago. So the first stage, I think, was trying to take what I created at Topiary to Seoul. But the team were different, the clientele were very different, and the whole structure of the place was obviously very different. So I thought I was going there to do exactly that, but I worked it out pretty quickly that it's not gonna work. So keeping the ethos and the original drive intact. I spoke to a few people that had come up, and one person in particular just said, "It's not you on a plate." Like I made some changes from that original format to still use locals, still use it all, still make sure that was at the core of it. But the use of higher end products, I guess, was not who I was, and they could feel that on the plate. So that was a really powerful moment. So I made the decision to just go back in a way to where I started, but polish things a little bit, I guess, and put a little bit more time into the development of each dish rather than it being a Topiary, a very off the cuff. This is just a rocked up on the doorstep, let's serve it. So a little bit more structure, a little bit more playing around with the flavors and the plating, and making sure it could be executed in that environment. And I think we're just getting there now, which is very exciting.
Is there a dish or two you can tell us about that sort of exemplifies this shift?
Oh, the crab crumpet's definitely a world favourite, but I think the plating was something that was interesting and something that was a little bit different. So we make our own crumpets obviously on site, and then have the picked blue swimmer crab meat with some chopped green tomato and a smoked tomato mayonnaise holding it all together. That's piped onto the crumpet, and then we've got daikon radish or some icicles in it at the time, whether it's and that's been so chiffonade down and then sliced again into sort of half-size matchsticks, so it looks like icicles covering over the whole thing. Then we make a shell butter sauce out of the bisque base. So that was like a simple transition type dish that made sure we were using each part, that just looked a little bit more high-end, I guess, than the garden to table type food I was serving at Topiary.
There's a huge staff shortage right across Australia at the moment, but you mentioned you've held on to key kitchen staff at Topiary over many years. What's the secret to holding on to good staff like that?
The surrounds are stunning. Being completely surrounded by the seasons and being able to literally walk out the front door and pick your garnishes each day is a fantastic way to start the day. But that can be done in other kitchens. So I think predominantly it's the evolution of the place and always moving forward. The thirst for knowledge, I think the need and the want to learn how to get back to basics in making cheese and curing and things like that was a passion that came up throughout a few of the chefs. So that's a direction that the menu took. And I think allowing them to be a huge part of the menu writing process and the trial and error period is great. And then, just treating people with respect. I think obviously a lot of kitchens over many years have been harsh ones to work in, and that can teach you some valuable lessons as well. We treat you, seeing you spend just as much time with them, and giving them a say is a huge part of being a chef these days, or just in hospitality in general.
What surprised you about this big role that you've taken on at Soul Restaurant?
Being in the city is a very different feeling. I think the opinions are harsh sometimes, and they were when we first opened. Yeah, and talking with the customers about what did they expect and what don't you understand, and how can I assist in the education side of it to try and help it make sense. But yeah, the process, I guess, and the original finding your feet stage was full on, and but I'm glad we got through it. It was a test of character for not only myself but for the team as well, and we got through. And hitting our first birthday yesterday, it was a big round of applause at briefing, and very proud of what we've achieved so far.
What do you love about what you do at the moment, and the changes that you've had in regards to your own career?
I think that the test of using it all on a large scale with a limited team has been a huge part of it. I think looking back at how hotels were run many years ago with a butchery area, and a fishmongery area, and receiving cool rooms that were washing and processing vegetables as they arrived from the farms. Sort of then the world transitioning into this buy-in backpacks of pre-cut meats and pre-peeled potatoes. So trying to bring back some of that has been a huge part, a proud moment, I guess, of being there, because that's what I envisaged going there to do, and I'm excited and proud of the fact that everybody's dug deep and we've managed to stay true to that now.
Soul Restaurant isn't as surrounded by local producers like Topiary, but have you made new connections with producers in this role?
Most definitely. The producers that we have been using for many years, I've got them on board straight away, and the feeling of purchasing 100 kilos of something as opposed to 10 is a really cool feeling of support. So that those producers are still there, and being more and where we can get it from as well. A lot of the smaller growers across in the Flurio didn't deliver to the northern side over at Tea Tree Gully, so we used what we could there, which was what helped shape what it is. But yeah, here the options are endless as far as local produce goes, and the quality of seafood particularly, and the vegetables that are being grown on a small scale are incredible. And it's been great to be able to keep ahead of the game seasonally and get in touch with the suppliers and make sure we could get a good amount of whatever it was that's coming into season and utilise it to the best of our ability.
Is there any new producers that you can tell us about that you've made these connections with?
You've had Adam from Westside Mushies on before. He's 12 kilometres from the city centre, so getting mushrooms from a very close proximity was very exciting, and that made our first menu, which was great. He's very new and up and coming, which is fantastic to see, with different varieties and the sustainability edge really starting to jump in on the growing side of it as well. The Dairyman in the Barossa is one that we weren't able to connect with originally, and his cream, his pure cream is incredible. So there's awesome new products.
Having run a very small venue and a really large venue, what sort of advice do you have for potential new owners or operators about running different size venues?
Organisation and having a team that are willing to just jump into change is extremely important. No matter how structured I try and make the menu and how I want to be, produce doesn't wait for anybody at the end of the day. So you do need to be ready to go, and you do need to have ideas in the back of your head at all times, so that when you can pounce on getting the produce in and then showing the team how you want it prepared. But the organisation is huge, and it's something that was very off the cuff at Topiary, and it was a thrown in the deep end type situation of doing 100 covers and 7 to 10 plates per person with a team of 6. You need to have it sorted and orchestrated and firm in the mind of how it's going to run. So be confident that it can be done.
It's been a pretty turbulent period of time. What sort of positives have you taken from this period, and what are you looking forward to as we move forward?
I'm looking forward to contributing to the industry in a different way, I think. I've been very fortunate to have a year of positives, which has been incredible, even though there's been some downs as well. But the positives have outweighed it for me this year, which has been great. But trying to use that point that I'm at now to contribute back to the industry and help others where I can, get involved in the sustainability aspect a little bit more, and help guide other restaurants and chefs and owners.
Well, Kane, we've absolutely loved having you on the Luminaries today on Deep in the Weeds. Your future is bright, no doubt. You've had an incredible period of time, and a lot of acknowledgement and awards. Look forward to seeing what you do next. Please keep in touch, and we'll catch up again soon.
Thank you so much for having me on. Cheers.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we take a deep dive into the lives of the incredible people who ply their trade in the food and hospitality sector. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast, or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.